Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be sharing with you some delicious autumn sweet ideas, recipes sort of thing. And this is also a chance for you to see how I'm cooking and the ingredients I have access to now that I'm in my new place. So obviously my resources are a bit more limited than what they were back at home. But I have managed to film a complete recipe video, which will be some sweets. We have that sweet tooth as you do in autumn, or any time of year really. Hopefully to fulfill that sweet tooth you'll try some of these recipes out. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start out with this snack maker fruit cake, as for my birthday last year I actually got a snack maker and this was my first time using it. So in a mixing bowl you're going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. I am using Nuttelex because Nuttelex was actually cheaper than butter at the grocery store. Then you're going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. Give that a stir so you're creaming the fat and the sugar together. Then you're going to add in 1 egg and just mix it all around. Then in a separate bowl, add 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. I don't have a cup measure, so I'm just using a measuring jug. Then you're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Then you're going to take 1/3 cup of sultanas or raisins and add that to the dry ingredients and a handful of almonds. And then add a tablespoon of lemon juice, but I accidentally added this to the dry ingredients, but doesn't matter too much. Then combine the dry ingredients with the wet ingredients and give that all a stir to make a batter. In the meantime, we're going to heat up our snack maker. It's best to spray it with some cooking spray so nothing sticks. Once it's heated up, you're going to spoon the batter into the snack maker and cook for about 5 to 10 minutes. Once it's a cake-like texture, open the snack maker up and remove the cake with a spatula. And there you have it, your snack maker fruit cake. In my case, this was enough to serve one person. It could probably serve around 2 to 3 people maybe. Feel free to adjust the serving depending on how many people you want to make this for. You might just have to cook in batches if you're using a tiny snack maker like I was. Now I'm going to show you this meringue block recipe. That's the best name I could come up with, but I was determined to redeem myself after trying to make a meringue out of only egg yolks, but this is still not really a proper meringue. So the first thing you're going to do is take 1 egg and separate the whites from the yolk, and we're only going to be using the egg whites. And now, because I don't have an electric beater, adding a teaspoon of baking powder will sort of help it to get to that somewhat meringue consistency, but it won't be perfect. So you're going to whisk that mixture until it starts to get somewhat bubbly and turns white, pretty much. Then we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of lemon juice and measure out 1/4 cup of sugar, and we're going to add the sugar in slowly, a spoonful at a time as we whisk. Before you add your next spoonful, make sure that the first spoonful of sugar has dissolved, and then keep repeating that process until you run out of sugar. Then if you need to, add 1 more teaspoon of baking powder and keep whisking. Then heat your oven to 180 degrees. Line an oven tray with some baking paper, and once the mixture's somewhat thick, you're going to spoon it onto the baking paper. But unlike what I did, best to grease it first before putting it on there so it doesn't stick. And put it in the oven to bake for 15 minutes. Once it's ready, take it out, and there you have it, this meringue block. This turned out much better than the attempt to make meringues with egg yolks. It's not a proper meringue, but it tastes almost like a meringue, just in a different form. Just break off bits of it and enjoy. Okay, now we're going to make these stuffed baked apples. So we're going to preheat our oven to 220 degrees. Then we're going to take 4 apples, doesn't matter what kind. I used Fuji apples as that's what I had. And we're going to cut the top off and then try to core them. I was not very good at this, but I found something that somewhat worked. Once you've cut the top off, use a spoon to scrape out as much as you can of the core on the inside. Just hope and pray that none of the core is left in there. If you can find a better technique that works for you, use that instead. Then in a mixing bowl, we're going to add 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/2 cup of oats, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of sultanas, a teaspoon of cinnamon, almonds, coconut flakes, 4 tablespoons of Nuttelex, and then we're also using lemon juice. Then we're going to use our fingers to combine all this together. You want to rub the fat you used into the dry ingredients so it resembles the crumble that you would use for apple crumble. Then we're going to line a baking tray with some baking paper, place our apples on it. We're going to add 4 tablespoons of the filling to each apple. You of course will have leftovers, but that's for snacking on. We're going to bake for about 25 to 30 minutes or until the apples are golden brown, and there you have it, these stuffed and baked apples. They're so delicious, that stuffing is top notch. And who doesn't love a good baked apple, right? Next up, we've got these flat zucchini brownies. You'll see why they're called that in a bit.
But we're going to preheat our oven to 200 degrees. We're going to take one zucchini, top and tail it, and then grate it all. If you don't want huge chunks, you can use a finer grater, but the big chunks don't bother me. We're then going to add the grated zucchini to a mixing bowl, and then we're going to take this boxed brownie mix, because I didn't have time to make these from scratch. As you can see, bit small of a bowl, but my biggest bowl was in use. We're then going to crack in 2 eggs, and 4 tablespoons of Nuttelex or butter, and give this a mix. If your fat's really solid, be sure to soften it first. And there's me having a conversation with someone while I'm doing this. But once it starts to turn into a brownie batter-like mixture, stop mixing, line a baking tray with baking paper, and pour it all out onto the baking paper. Now, this is why they're flat, because I don't have a slice tin at the moment. So I had to make the best with what I had, and I didn't have any alfoil. Do that trick to keep the brownies within a certain part of the baking tray. So I just had to make flat brownies. Then we're going to place into the oven to bake for about 15 minutes, but be sure to keep an eye on it so it doesn't burn because it'll be much thinner than usual. And for any that doesn't make it onto the tray, just lick the mixture. That's one of the best parts of baking. Then once it's ready, take it out. If it's a little undercooked and gooey in the middle, that's alright. Not going to kill you. And it's a better texture having it gooey in the center anyway. But then there you have it, your flat zucchini brownie mix. I didn't show this, but I sliced this into portions after, and there's still some structure to them. Still tastes good, just a bit flat. And it's a good way to incorporate a vegetable into your dessert. And finally, we're going to make these battered apples. Might be an odd recipe, as this was more of an experimental recipe, but still thought I'd share it with you. So I'm going to take 4 apples, cut them in half, quarter them, and then cut the core out, which is what I do when I'm slicing apples like this, not trying to core it from the inside. Then we're going to cut the apples into slices. Doesn't have to be precise, but you want them to be relatively small. Then in a mixing bowl, we're going to add 4 tablespoons of Nuttelex or whatever fat you're using. Kind of a common theme in these recipes. Then we're going to add 4 tablespoons of sugar and a teaspoon of vanilla extract or vanilla essence. We're going to give this a stir, essentially creaming the mixture. If you have an electric beater, use that. Otherwise, in a separate bowl, we're going to add a cup of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a teaspoon of baking powder. Then we're going to add a cup of milk. I'm using soy milk, as I found soy milk to be cheaper than regular milk at the grocery store. Then we're going to add in the creamed fat, sugar, and vanilla. Give this all a stir until it starts to form sort of like a pudding batter, and this was getting too runny, so I added a 1/4 cup of flour, gave it another mix. Then we're going to add the apples and just fold them in. Once they're relatively incorporated, we're going to heat up our snack maker, spray it with some cooking spray. Just going to spoon this in batches. What we're essentially trying to do is we're not actually cooking it, we're just sort of lightly browning it. So if you wanted to, you could literally just eat this straight up after we've finished doing the mixing. Nothing will happen to you because there's no raw eggs in it. But if you're happy with it after it's been in the snack maker for a bit, take it out and transfer it to a bowl. Keep adding in batches of the mixture until you've run out. And then once you're done, there you have it. These battered apples, lightly brown on the top and very raw in the middle. But it tastes good, and it's basically just apples covered in mostly uncooked batter. If you want it cooked, best to oven bake it. And this will be perfect with cream or ice cream, so if you want to add that, by all means. So if you're sick of regular old apples, try them like this.
So that is it for these delicious autumn sweet recipes. Now you've seen how I'm cooking in my new place and the kind of ingredients and appliances that I'm using while living as a student and on a budget. But yay, this is my first recipe video in my new place, and I hope to make more of these very soon. But thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any new videos. So, till next time, in my next video, I shall see you then. Goodbye.